All right, we're just waiting for our. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Our first guest is with us today. We're going to have two guests. Jake is joining us, and then Seth Hart from WRUF is going to come in and talk a little bit about ESPN Gainesville. But first, I would like to welcome Jake Winderman in. Jake is one of my former students, and Jake is with CBS Sports. He is an assignment desk editor and digital content creator with CBS Sports. You're based out of Fort Lauderdale, is that right?
Yep, based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yep, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Fantastic. So, Jake, tell us a little bit about you've had some, different jobs, I guess, especially when you were here covering Gator basketball and some different stuff, and then you went on to work at the NBA. But tell us a little bit about your journey to UF and while you were here at UF and where you are today with CBS Sports.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I obviously started at University of Florida back in 2014, which now is a long time ago. And I came in as someone who wanted to do broadcast journalism, someone who wanted to be on air, doing different types of packages, anchoring, also written work, potentially podcasting work. And during my time at UF, I wore a lot of different hats. I worked at WRUF doing the usual ESPN Gainesville shifts, which I'm sure many of you did. I was a Florida basketball beat writer for 3 years for WRUF, and that was putting together audio features, written stories, features, articles, all of that different fun stuff. And I was also an anchor over at WFT, and I did the First to Five newscast as the sports anchor for that. So at UF, did a lot of different things, whether it was writing, radio, on-air, anchoring, podcasting. Wore a lot of different hats when I was at UF to get as much experience as I possibly could. And I graduated in 2018. And after I graduated, I went on to work at the NBA as a social media coordinator and editor. And I worked that job for 2 seasons. And my main work was with the NBA G League, which is basically the NBA's minor league. And my job was to run their day-to-day social media. So that was the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, website, everything you guys like to do and scroll through your phones and just sort of look through. For the G League, did some stuff on the NBA handle as well, along with the WNBA and the NBA 2K League. And then after my time up there, which was up in the New Jersey, New York area, I moved back down to South Florida about 1.5 years ago, where I'm currently working at a CBS Sports as an assignment desk editor and digital content creator. And at CBS Sports, I mainly work on a product called CBS Sports HQ, which is a free 24/7 streaming service if you go on cbssports.com, and it's essentially Sports Center all day. So all the sports news you could ever want, all the sports gambling, fantasy sports angles, lots of different analysts and guests that we have on our website coming on to give takes and picks, and a lot of different things like that. And my current job essentially is to capture all the news that goes on through the day, figure out what's important, what's not, what might be breaking news, what people want to hear about, and sort of put together a plan for every single day on CBS Sports HQ of what we're going to show, what our programming is going to be like, and what's going to be the most interesting stuff that viewers are going to want to see. And through that, I do a lot of script writing. I do some writing for the website. I do some graphic work, creating full screen graphics and things of that ilk based on different statistical packages, patterns, gambling lines, things of that nature. And I also do some video and audio editing for the actual show. And that's a lot of editing, different, sound on tape stories, packages, just different videos that we use on our platform for those kind of shows. So that's just a sort of, I guess, a recap of from where I've been from UF to where I'm working now today.
So tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day. So when you get in, what time do you get in? What kind of stuff is on your plate? And I know it obviously varies from day to day sometimes, but take us through maybe a day in the life.
Yeah, so there's 3 different potential shifts that I work. So there's a 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift where essentially you're covering all the stuff in the morning and the early afternoon. There is the usual 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift, which is, of course, the general day stuff leading into the evening of pregame coverage. And it's definitely a very rare shift to have in sports media, getting to work sort of a 9 to 5, 9 to 6 type job. And then there's the 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. shift, which is actually what I'm going to be working today. So essentially, when I go into work, I go through all the different sports websites, whether it's ESPN, CBS Sports, Yahoo, Fox Sports. I comb through the Associated Press reports, And essentially, I put together a checklist for our anchors, for our producers, for our senior executives of what the 10 to 15 most important and interesting things going on in sports are, what the 10 to 15 most interesting games are that day, whether it's NBA, college basketball, NHL. Put that list together. And then after putting that list together of what's important going on in sports, I go through essentially our contact list of guests and analysts and pair to each story different people who are going to be able to come on HQ and be able to discuss those from a professional standpoint. After I've done all of that, I start working on the actual show. So I start writing scripts for the anchors. I start putting together graphics that are going to pair with our different stories. So, for example, if we were doing a story on the NBA trade deadline coming up, I might pair one of our analysts. We have Avery Johnson, who is a former NBA Coach of the Year, former Alabama coach. We'll have him on, and through that, I'll write scripts geared to potentially players who might be traded and put together different graphics of the list of potential trades, different picks that might be traded, and sort of things of that ilk. And then along with all of those tasks, I'll basically spend that day planning for the next day so that we're not blindsided by anything, whether it's potentially a press conference for a coach getting interviewed. Like earlier this morning, I was setting up the Broncos just hired Nathaniel Hackett, so I was setting up that press conference and making sure we're going to be able to stream that live and cut different sound bites for different packages from that. And essentially, the last thing I do is just making sure we're prepped for any breaking news, because one of the coolest things that we do is we're able to get up essentially immediately with anything that happens. So when you get a Twitter alert from Adrian Wojnarowski, from Adam Schefter, NBA, NFL, anything of that, we want to be the first to get up and bring you that news as quickly as possible. So I spend the days sort of speculating on what could happen that day or the next day, preparing us for that kind of thing so that we're ready to go right at the snap of a finger.
Give us a little insight and tell us about maybe something that you didn't have the opportunity to do here, or you didn't learn while you were here, that might be helpful for some of these students that may be interested in a similar role in which you find yourself in right now, that they can help maybe prepare themselves.
Yeah, so I would say a really important tool, and I know that a lot of kids in the program at the J School are, of course, learning Adobe Premiere and learning video editing, and that is something that has taken me very far in what I've been able to do so far, and that I haven't had to go through those types of tutorials. I've been ready to video edit as well. But the next thing I would say is definitely familiarize yourself with Adobe Photoshop. That's something that I'm still sort of learning on the side and catching up on, and something that I didn't learn as much when I was at UF and sort of was learning on the fly at the NBA and then more comfortable with it here at CBS Sports. I would say make sure that you have both of those under your belt, whether it's Premiere or Photoshop or both, preferably both, because nowadays, even if you're an anchor, if you're an MMJ, if you're working in social media, even if you're just a beat writer or a journalist, those two things are something that you are really going to need to know, because as many of you know, you're basically a one-man band a lot of the times you go out on a job. So if you're able to have those skills in your back pocket along with whatever your primary skill is, whether it's writing, whether it's broadcasting, whether it's social media, having that entire package will really help you go far, no matter really what job you're doing, since you're going to have to do it all at one point. And if you know how to do it going into the job, you're going to be way ahead of the pack. You're going to have a lot of opportunities come about quicker. You might be a leading candidate for a job. If you have all of those skills in your toolbox before you leave UF, you're just going to be in a lot more successful position for when you're actually working in the field.
So what's the 5-year plan for you? You're currently in Fort Lauderdale, close to right around your hometown area. You're in a good spot. You're at CBS Sports and working somewhat with a startup. Yeah, I guess you could say that HQ is a startup.
Yeah.
What kind of upward mobility do you have in your position, or what are you looking for next?
So sort of like Eric mentioned, CBS Sports HQ is, of course, a part of the larger CBS Sports and CBS Sports Interactive, which is, of course, been around for a long time. But this product's only been along since 2017. So there's a lot of room for expansion. So when I left the NBA and I wanted to come back down to Fort Lauderdale, and I took my original job at CBS Sports, I originally took a job as a production associate, and it was a job that wasn't exactly aligned with what I wanted to do, but it was with a company that I really wanted to work at. And I think that's sort of some important advice to give, is that if there's a company you really want to work at and a place you really want to be, even if it's not your exact job title or exactly what you want, don't turn it away at first. Don't say you're not interested. Look into it, because even more so important than the exact job title you want is being at a company where you feel like you can move up, a company where you feel like you enjoy yourself and where you want to enjoy working for a while. So I came to CBS Sports as a production associate, and within 3 months, I was able to move over to the assignment desk team, which is more so where I wanted to be in terms of compiling that news, working on breaking news and all of that. And something I really enjoy about CBS Sports is they want to put you in position to succeed of doing what you want. And as I mentioned before, I was a Florida basketball beat writer for the final 3 years I was at UF. I did some football beat reporting for Rivals and some of the different fan sites that I'm sure a lot of you follow and go on the forums and things of that nature. So the 5-year plan was to get into CBS Sports originally, into a company I wanted to be at, take the first job I could find available that was somewhat geared to what I wanted to do. And within 5 years, I would like to be doing writing for the CBSSports.com site, since that's ultimately what I want to do. Some podcasting potentially, and essentially covering college basketball, college football, the NBA draft, and the NBA. Those are the 4 things that I'm most familiar with and most enjoy, and something that I've been trying to sort of build up my abilities to cover while working at CBS, while doing a completely different job. So I would say the 5-year plan was starting where I was, coming in as a PA, working over to the assignment desk, and then hopefully once I hit that 5-year mark, doing some writing for the website, doing some podcasting, and a little more on-air work, a little more of the stuff that I was studying and doing when I was at UF.
So one of the things I usually ask a lot of the guests that will come in is talking about sacrifices that you have to make in working and covering sports in general. A lot of students want to get involved in sports because it's something they really enjoy watching, participated in when they were younger. What do you see are some of the sacrifices that have to be made when working in sports, from a professional maybe, and obviously more probably of a personal standpoint?
Of course. So I've obviously been in the field for about 4 years now, 4 years out of college. So I have worked at the NBA and CBS Sports, and I have seen the full side of it. Know that going into sports, you're going to be working on something that you love. It's going to be a passion of yours. And if it's the correct job and the correct job title and the correct company, it's not going to feel like you're doing work. It's going to feel like something you're just really enjoying. From a personal side, this is not going to be the job that a lot of your friends in the business school, that maybe a lot of your friends in architectural school or any of the other colleges work, where they're working a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 6 type of job, and their weekends are completely free. Sports, as many of you know, games, unless you're following European soccer, which happens during the day, the games that you're going to be covering are going to be happening at night. They're going to be happening on the weekends, and they're going to take away from some of that personal time where, it might be a Saturday night and some of your friends might be going out, they might be going out to dinner and they invite you, but, you have your shift that night and you have to cover a game, or you have to work the night show, or you have to work the overnight show. So if you are interested in working in sports, which I understand why you are, because it's a hell of a good time, and it's something that has really, since I left college, not felt like a day of work for me. Understand that on the personal side, at least at the start, when you're really breaking your way into the field, there's going to be a lot of weekend work. There's going to be a lot of night work. And while it's not the normal schedule, if you can adjust to it, if you can treat it as, of course it's work, but if you can treat it as a hobby and something you really enjoy doing, it'll be something you're able to become much more comfortable with. And then eventually down the line, as you move into potentially an executive position or a managerial position, there may be those more normal hours. But 100%, if you are working in sports and coming out of the field at our age or at your age, coming right out of college, you're most likely going to be sacrificing some weekend days, some weekday nights to be working on stuff that's going to help build your career and help make you better in your field and able to progress along when opportunities come about. So I would say that's probably the biggest personal sacrifice coming out of college, is just know you're not going to be on the same schedule as a lot of your friends where you're just working throughout the week during the day. There's going to be a lot of odd times. There's going to be a lot of odd events you're covering. But again, if you love it and it's something you're passionate about, at the end of the day, you're going to realize you love what you're doing. And while a lot of your friends might have more normal schedules, they're probably not enjoying their jobs as much. They're probably not going in looking forward every day to what story they're going to write, what event they're going to cover, what feature or story they're going to tell. So I would say, as long as you enjoy what you're doing and you're at a company you like, and it's something that you have a passion for, those personal sacrifices I mentioned will seem a bit less when you're really enjoying the job you're doing.
Well, what questions you guys have for Jake? Anything come to mind? Anybody else? What sets CBS Sports, especially the digital product in HQ, what sets it apart from some of the other similar products that are out there right now, Jake?
Yeah, so I know I'm talking to a college class, so obviously, I know that gambling is bad and all of that stuff. But one of the things that sort of sets us apart at CBS Sports and a landscape that we're trying to get into and is even different. I mean, when I was in college, when you looked at ESPN, the announcers were not mentioning spreads, they weren't mentioning over/unders, they weren't mentioning futures on games. But something that sets us apart at CBS Sports is that we really dove into the sports gambling and fantasy sports angle ahead of everyone, where it's sort of in your face on all of our graphics. You're seeing lines on games, you're seeing totals, you're seeing predictions. And as sports gambling gets legalized more and more throughout the country, I know we had it in Florida for about a month, but obviously in different states it's being legalized, and it's something that is a massive market that you can get into. It is not something that was available even when I came out of college, and it's a really new budding field. So what really separates us at CBS Sports is that we are all about gambling. We are all about fantasy sports all day long, and we want to be a place that people who are getting into this space and that want to learn about sports gambling, that want to make smarter picks, that want to learn about closing line value and different aspects to give you a little edge over the sports book. That's where we come along with our sports gambling experts from Sportsline, which is our premium service that has an algorithm that spits out picks, gives you analysis. And then on the fantasy sports side, we have all of our fantasy football, basketball, baseball writers, all of those people coming on constantly to make sure you're making the right lineup moves, you're making the right ad drops, you're attacking the waiver wire correctly, and you're making those correct trades. So that is definitely what's separating us at HQ right now from maybe an ESPN or a Fox Sports, in that we are very up in front in terms of, we know that is a budding space and something that is really taking off. And we want to be the place you go when you're looking for picks to make that night and when you're looking to set your fantasy lineup for that day.
So we have a lot of students in here probably in the next semester, next year or so, that are looking for that first internship, that first job. What advice can you give them in regards to, all of the above: networking, resume, phone interviews, those sorts of things? Some of these students are just getting into that. What advice do you have?
Yeah, so the advice I would give is that treat any single person that you meet or that you talk to like they could be a potential connection that could get you your dream job, whether it is next month, whether it is a year from now, whether it is 10 years from now. You never know where people are going to be, even if they're your peers right now and they seem at a similar level or maybe about a level above. You never know where people are going to be. So one thing I would say is always make sure to get somebody's business card that you're talking to. And something I did in college was I printed my own business card with sort of my background and contacts. So that's something you can always have available when you meet someone at a career show, or you meet someone, maybe you're taking a tour of a TV station or something like that. You can make a quick connection. You get their business card, you give them yours, which shows initiative and shows that you bring something to the table and that you're interested and you're professional up front. I would say that. Social media is a great place to meet people that you may never meet in person. So whether it's on Twitter, making connections, whether it's sending a direct message, whether it's reaching out to someone, people are a lot more reachable now on social media than they were obviously before social media, when you would more so have to see them in person or email them. So use social media as a tool to make connections with people that you're interested in networking with, potentially companies that you're interested in working with, companies that you're interested in interning with, and doing all of those types of things. And honestly, a really good piece of advice that helped me in terms of getting internships and getting jobs, and this might be a little bit of a different piece of advice, but this is probably one of the best things I got, is make sure you have a really well-rounded out background. So even if you're going for, let's say you're going for a sports internship, and I interned at Fox Sports Florida. Let's say you're applying for that internship, right? You might think that you're just covering, Florida Panthers, Miami Marlins, Miami Heat. But what you don't realize is you're also going to be telling features with human interest stories. You're going to be telling stories about, people's backgrounds, things that didn't have to do with sports. So one of the absolute best pieces of advice that I've ever received, and that I try and tell as many people that are trying to get into the field, is when you are in college right now, you have room for error. You can write stories, and if they're not the best, your professors and your editors and your teachers are going to work with you to make them better. Cover things that you are unfamiliar with and cover things that you are uncomfortable with. So let's say you're a basketball beat writer and basketball just comes natural to you, like I was. You cover the games, you're able to write features on that type of stuff, you're able to write previews of that sorts of nature. While you're doing that, get out of there and write a news story about something completely different that you know nothing about, that you're uncomfortable with, because that's what's going to sharpen your skills and make you better as a whole and more appealing when you're applying to these companies. So go cover, go cover a rodeo, go cover Gator Nationals, go cover some of the drag racing that goes on, in the general Gainesville area, go cover some horse racing in Ocala. Go cover something that you may have never covered before, that you're uncomfortable with, and something that you really might not have any knowledge going into. And from doing that kind of work and working on things that you're uncomfortable with, it's going to make you better in the stuff that you are comfortable with, because you're going to feel like if you can cover something that you know nothing about going into, that you have no previous knowledge or any sort of intuition about, and you can nail that and you can work on that type of stuff, you're going to be appealing to any type of company, whether you end up working in sports, news, entertainment, because you're going to have a portfolio, a resume, and a reel that shows that you are not a one-trick pony. You don't just do sports, because I'm sure, as Eric could tell you, and a lot of my friends who work in local news as sports anchors and news anchors can tell you, even if you're the sports anchor in a small town, when a hurricane comes or when weather comes, or when a tornado comes, you basically become a de facto weatherman. Or if there's a giant news story in your market, you essentially become a news reporter, and you become an MMG, not covering sports, but potentially covering a murder case in the area, covering elections, which basically all anchors get pulled on to help for that type of stuff and national disaster and weather type stuff. So the best advice I can give you guys is, I know this is a sports class, and I know this is obviously a class of people who want to work in sports. You're going to get all of that work done with the various internships and projects and assignments you get working for WRUF, WUFT, and some of your classes. But go out for some of these classes and for some of these assignments, or even on your own time, and cover these things you're uncomfortable with. Because when you can show a company that you're capable of covering anything and everything, from the absolute weirdest, most wild stories that have nothing to do with sports to your typical, it's 7 o'clock, you're covering this NBA game, you're going to be a lot more appealing to companies than just someone who has only done sports, or only covered one sport, or only done one type of thing.
Question?
So when you're writing for like these different companies, you're wanting to make sure that you're checking all the boxes that they want you to check. How do you make sure you're checking all those boxes while also making sure that your voice and your style of writing is still coming through, especially since you're writing for other people in scripts and stuff like that? So how do you make sure that you're making that company happy with what they want to broadcast, while also bringing what you bring to the table through the writings?
Yeah, so this is something that I've learned at NBA and CBS Sports, and even when I was interning at Fox Sports, is that when you're starting at a company, and this is a whole giant packet that I've gotten at the NBA and CBS Sports, is they essentially give you a style guide of the way they want you to write. So you're going to be using AP style, of course, but whether it is using certain abbreviations, whether it is different formatting of paragraphs, if you're working as a writer, you're going to have an editor or somebody you're working with that's going to steer you in the right direction. But, here's the thing at the end of the day, obviously, you want to use your voice, and you want to make the story yours, and you want to make the story personal. If you write an interesting story that comes from your voice and is intriguing and makes people want to stick around and want to finish that story, the different formatting and writing for different people isn't going to matter as much, because as you guys know, whether you're reading a story about soccer, a story about the NBA, a story about the NHL, if your story is interesting, if your story is intriguing, if your story makes people stick around and it uses facts and logic to build a narrative or build a perspective, any editor or company that you work with is going to be interested in that story and help you just sort of gear it to essentially what they want their website to look like, or whether it's different subjects or subheadings or things of that nature. So more so than trying to gear it to the company and what they want to see, I would say more so focus on just making the story a narrative, make it something that draws people in from the start, has an interesting middle, and makes them want to read essentially to the end. So more so than worrying about what each company is going to want, when you come in, they're going to give you that style guide of how they want things done. But if you can make a story interesting, I guarantee you, no matter how you write it or what format you write it, the company that you're working for is going to be more than happy to use it in any capacity, because that's going to bring people in. It's going to make people recognize who you are, and it's going to make people want to come back and read those stories that you're writing. So more importantly than formatting it for a specific company is really just make it interesting. And always, when you write something or you cover a story, think to yourself, whether it's when you start, whether you're in the middle of it, or whether you finish, if I'm just scrolling through Twitter right now, or I'm just scrolling through CBSSports.com, is this something I would click on? And within the first 3 to 4 sentences, is this something that I want to continue reading? I would say that's the most important thing, more so than gearing it for a specific company or a specific editor.
So to that, I guess, Jake, it used to be, even 10, 15 years ago, that someone that wanted to share their opinion on, a game or an event or a topic that's going on in the sports world, that was kind of an earned thing where you had, gone through 10, 15 years of being a beat reporter, then you were an editorial or opinion person right now, right? Mm-hmm. So how have you seen that kind of changed over, your 5 or so years in the business, and even here at UF, where maybe that's not the case? People are given a little bit more leeway in the stories that they're writing, where they're allowed to inject opinion into the content that they're creating.
100%. And I think that is how it's absolutely changed the most, obviously, since I was in college and I was even a beat writer covering the basketball team, is that in today's day and age, there is, and I mean, you can even see this when you're scrolling on your ESPN app. A lot of times when you're clicking on a game on the app and you're reading a preview of it, that type of thing is literally written by an algorithm and written by a computer who is putting together the facts for a game story or a game preview. So all of the basic stuff like that, where you would go and sort of cover a game and just write the basic game report, is stuff that is not only able to sort of be done by that computer algorithm, or something that can be done at a very basic level, and something that is available to basically every company in terms of just a basic game story or a basic game preview. Sort of how I've seen it change is that because there's just a standard of that being readily available everywhere, people are more so interested in the analysis and the opinions and that type of thing, because that's what you can't auto-generate. You can't have an algorithm write an opinion story on why, a recent story of why Barry Bonds should or shouldn't have been in the Hall of Fame. Now that algorithm can write who made the Hall of Fame, who didn't, and when they're being inducted, because that's just data or info you can put in a computer. But putting together an interesting narrative using facts, or an opinion piece using facts and logics and anecdotes and quotes and things of that nature, is something that can only come from a personal level. So I think you've seen it change so much in recent times, because you have essentially computers able to do that basic legwork, and you can only get that type of interesting info and opinion from a real human person who's able to put together that type of narrative. So I would say that's one of the absolute biggest shifts, is that when you're reading a game story after a game of someone covering an event anymore, it's not really just your basic, this was the score, this person led in scoring, the coach said this after the game, here's who they play next. It's more so, why did the plays this team run work, and what do you think they could have done to improve that, using both stats from the game and quotes afterwards? Why the games coming up next are important, and what type of angle they may have, and how they may affect the standings and certain things of that nature. So I would say that has definitely been the biggest shift, where you see a lot more people writing for opinions. And I don't like to use the word takes, because when people hear the word take, they think, first take, Stephen A, Skip Bayless, just yelling information, not even information, just yelling opinions at you. More so than that, don't just be worried about, when you're writing an opinion piece, just making sure what you think gets out there and that people know right away what your takes are. Be able to give your opinion, but be able to give it in a way such as you were a lawyer in a courtroom and you're trying to defend your client, or you're trying to prosecute someone. Give your opinion by giving the most important facts that aren't just from the box score, where you pull, this guy had 19 points, this guy had 8 rebounds. Go a little bit more, give an opinion piece where, let's say, so I'm a big Florida basketball fan, and I still watch the team. And so let's say you were talking about Kawhi Reeves, who's one of the freshmen. So instead of saying and giving something that an algorithm could do and say, Kawhi Reeves deserves more minutes, he scored 13 points this game and 13 points last game, dig a little deeper into what someone can't just pull up on their ESPN app when giving an opinion. Say maybe, Kawhi Reeves had 14 points this game, but if you look at his last 3 games, he had the best plus minus on the team. He led the team in transition opportunities, and what he brings on a defensive level of guarding positions 1 through 5 is what makes him an important asset. That's delivering an opinion of why someone should play more, without the reader just feeling like you're saying he should play more because he's a 5-star and he's the best and he's the most talented. Bring your opinion and bring your analysis, but if you provide it with different statistics and quotes and things of that nature, it's not just going to come off to someone like you're yelling your opinion. It's going to come off like a normal game story, where without them even knowing, you're giving them your analysis and your opinion at a level that you really didn't even 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
All right, final question. What type of content is really popping for you guys right now? Whether it's visual, written content, podcasts, what type of sport, what type of area? I know you mentioned gambling. What type of content is really popping for you guys right now?
Yeah, so I would say definitely two things. And this is interesting because the second thing that I'll mention has been more so of a newer phenomenon, and it's something funny to be working on. But first, I would say sports gambling and fantasy sports are absolutely at the forefront of what we're working on and the most important and the things that we get the highest engagement numbers on, because people, in states that are legal are looking to, make a bet on a game later that day, set their fantasy lineup. And for as much as people like to make their own opinions, they also like to be told by the experts essentially what to do and what to pick. And that's why they come to our website for that type of info. So that is definitely at the forefront of what we're pushing and the most interesting. And the second right now is on social media. And this is something that I have been helping work on. And it's funny that it's work is actually for anyone who's interested in working in social media right now. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat have been around for a while. People have certain algorithms and formulas that work for manipulating them. Get really good, and this is something that's helped us, at making sports TikToks and TikToks of that nature. TikTok might seem like something that you just mindlessly at 12:30 when you're lying in bed before you go to sleep, you're just scrolling through and watching funny videos. But that right now is one of our largest content drivers that we have on our social channels. We are seeing the highest engagement rates, whether it's likes and comments across the board on TikTok, and putting those together. And that's something that we use to then gear people back to the website and over to CBS Sports HQ. So yeah, I would say fantasy sports / gambling, and then attacking TikTok at 1,000 miles per hour and making sure that is an area of social media that we're at the forefront of, that we're being innovative of, and that we're being creative of. So if you're interested in working in social media, there's the big four that I mentioned obviously before, but if you can get really good at making TikToks, and this is something that I've seen on social media job applications for teams, for the CBS Sports social media job, they're looking for people who are good at making TikTok. So that sounds crazy, and it sounds like something you just do with your friends in your spare time. But if that's something you can get good at, along with Photoshop and Adobe Premiere, that is something that is going to be really enticing to a company that's looking to hire people in social media. So get good at those two things and you'll be good.
So real quick follow-up question. What type of content are you putting out on TikTok? Are you putting Gary Parrish doing like dances or something? No, I'm joking. But what kind of content is going out on TikTok?
So as much as we would love to have that kind of stuff, it is stuff, whether it is, if you've watched the SVP show before, you've seen bad beats and things of that nature. So it's putting bad beats on TikToks. It is clipping little portions of podcasts that we do, whether it's just like funny stuffs or bits that we do, and putting that type of stuff on there. It's doing like a quick opinion thing where it's like a 60-second opinion of why either Cooper Kupp or Devontae Adams should be wide receiver 1 in fantasy football next year. So it's a mixture of using stuff that's trending, like different trending videos and sounds, things of that nature, clipping different stuff from the content we already make and short forming it for TikTok, and then sort of sports informational and opinion stuff like the fantasy football thing I mentioned at the end. So sort of a mixed bag, but as long as you are funny, creative, and interesting and are able to keep people around longer than the first 5 seconds, that is how you're going to be successful working in sports TikTok.
Awesome.
Which is crazy to say. It's very different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to stay with the trends for sure.
Yes,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Yep. All right. Well, Jake, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in today, and have a great rest of your day and weekend, man.
Yeah, for sure. And for anyone who's in this class that's interested or has any questions about reaching out, I'm pretty sure my DMs are open on Twitter. It's just at Jake Winderman. Or if you want to email me and have any questions or interested in anything or want to bounce some ideas of, my email is jakewinderman@gmail.com. I'm sure Eric can pass that along to you with the spelling and all of that, but pretty simple, just first and last name on Twitter and then @gmail.com on email. So always happy to help fellow Gators. Would love to have more Gators working at CBS Sports. So if you have any ideas, questions, want to bounce anything off of me, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help.
Jake, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Have a good one, Eric. Good luck to Butler, man.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
You guys.